We're all busy people. And when you're busy, you tend to put off fun for later. We've certainly done that, prioritizing calls with sources or script writing over taking a relaxing break.
But one thing that helps us break that burnout-inducing habit is Best Fiends. This is a delightful mobile puzzle adventure game, and it's the perfect pastime to help you break out of the doldrums.
We are both obsessed with this game, which pits a squad of quirky, freedom-loving bugs against a horde of autocratic slugs. Whenever we have some downtime, like we're stuck in line or waiting on a call, or just taking a break after editing together an episode, we can knock out a level or two. We sometimes have to travel far and wide for our journalism, so it's nice to be able to play offline, even when we're in an area with iffy internet.
There's nothing better than getting on a roll and picking up tools to help in the quest to defeat the slugs. It's a nice mental break to take your mind off work and stress.
Áine is on level 995.
Kevin is on level 262. It's frankly getting embarrassing.
You've earned your fun time. Go to the App Store or Google Play to download Best Fiends for free. Plus, earn even more with $5 worth of in-game rewards when you reach level 5. That's friends without the R. Best Fiends.
November 7th, 2018 was College Country Night at the Borderline Bar and Grill in Thousand Oaks, California. About 200 college students from nearby schools like Pepperdine University and Moore Park College flooded the place, donning flannel shirts and cowboy boots to reflect the bar's Western theme. It was a great way to unwind and relax on a Wednesday night after a full day of classes.
But then, at 11:18 p.m., Ian David Long showed up, and everything changed in an instant. Long was a 28-year-old former Marine with a history of erratic behavior. People who knew him talked about his propensity to pick fights or to curse at his mother so loudly it would wake his neighbors. He carried with him 10 smoke bombs, a .45 caliber Glock, and 190 rounds of ammunition.
Upon entering the bar, he shot and killed the cashier near the door. Then he started firing on the patrons inside. People panicked. Some managed to hide in the bathroom. Others were able to use bar stools to break the second-floor windows and leap outside to safety.
Long remained, firing his weapon and posting notes about the carnage on Instagram. Some of the people who got away notified police, who sped to the scene, arriving within minutes. Some officers entered the bar and got into a shootout with Long.
At 11:38 p.m., Long, who must have realized there was no escape, committed suicide, shooting himself.
The spree had lasted just 20 minutes, but it left 13 people, including Long, dead. We'll take a moment now to read the names of the shooting victims, in alphabetical order based on last name.
Sean Adler, 48.
Cody Kaufman, 22.
Blake Dingman, 21.
Jake Dunham, 21.
Ron Heelis, 54.
Elena Housley, 18.
Daniel Manrique, 33.
Justin Meek, 23.
Marky Meza, 20.
Christina Morissette, 20.
Telemachus Orphanos, 27.
Noel Sparks, 21.
Some were employees of the bar and grill. Others were patrons. Some were students at nearby colleges. One was a sergeant with the Ventura County Sheriff's Department. One had even survived the 2017 Las Vegas shooting. Their deaths were an incalculable loss for their loved ones and the Thousand Oaks community.
In the aftermath of high-profile crimes, it's widely known that the Federal Bureau of Investigation dispatches personnel to help local law enforcement with investigative efforts.
But it's less well documented that the FBI has a specific division dedicated entirely to assisting the victims of crimes, the Victim Services Division. Today, we'll be sharing the story of one FBI official who helped lead the Bureau's efforts to support the Thousand Oaks community in the wake of that awful November night. My name is Áine Cain.
And I'm Kevin Greenlee.
And this is The Murder Sheet, a weekly true crime podcast.
Áine and I connected over the Burger Chef murders, a 1978 unsolved case involving the killings of 4 young restaurant employees.
Now we're looking to track restaurant homicides. To help us understand the patterns of these crimes, we created a spreadsheet of nearly 1,000 eatery-related killings, the Murder Sheet. We'll be drawing on that data throughout Season 1 to give you a deep dive into undercovered crimes.
We don't just rely on skimming the headlines. We dive into these cases to bring you in-depth coverage.
We're the Murder Sheet, and this is After the Borderline.
Kevin Gutfleisch and his FBI colleagues arrived in Thousand Oaks at the ash-strewn end of wildfire season. They were told to report for duty at 7 a.m., so they hunkered down in a local hotel for the night. At 3 a.m. that morning, they were notified that they must immediately evacuate the premises. The flames of a nearby fire had crept too close to the hotel.
We rendezvoused a couple of miles away at a parking lot, and we did not know where we were going to sleep that night because we just left our hotel. But honestly, it didn't matter because we knew that in a few hours we had to get to work. And so people slept in their cars in the parking lot. People went to get coffee and breakfast as soon as local establishments could open so that we could have breakfast.
The FBI's Victim Assistance Program is not deployed to build a case or gather evidence for a trial. After all, Long was already dead and beyond the reach of any earthly justice. The program is instead focused on aiding and empowering the living, the survivors, providing the victims of federal crimes with the opportunity to receive key services.
And in the aftermath of the Borderline shooting, not even an out-of-control wildfire could keep the team away.
We had a job to do. We were there for that single job, and we weren't going to let a lack of sleep get in our way.
Kevin is the unit chief of the Victim Services Division of the FBI's Terrorism and Special Jurisdiction Unit. The Thousand Oaks shooting was the first time he led a Victim Assistance Division response to a mass casualty event. When we spoke with him a few months ago, he gave us a good summary of his team and the work they're tasked with.
Today we have more than 200 employees as part of the Victim Services Division, and that includes more than 170 victim specialists located throughout the country with victim specialists in every state. I think it's important for people to know that every day we've got victim service providers who are working with victims of federal crimes every day in every state, not just when there's multiple people killed or injured. And those services really depend on what kind of crimes there are. But there are victims of child exploitation, financial crimes, crimes on Indian reservations, There's hundreds of categories of crimes that could be a federal crime. And victims of a federal crime will be contacted by a victim specialist. And every day they review new cases that are open in their FBI offices and then make contact with the victims to see how they're doing, to do a needs assessment.
A needs assessment, Kevin explained, is basically just a conversation with victims or victims' family members to see how they are doing and to determine what their needs are. After learning more about those needs, the Victim Assistance Program will try to meet them as best they can. After learning more about a person's situation, the Victim Assistance Program will try to meet those needs. Maybe a victim needs to see a counselor. Maybe they've suffered some financial hardship and need to get tapped into state crime victim compensation programs. It could also be something as simple as a call or a letter to a victim's employer to let them know what is going on.
Of course, victims will also receive updates on their case, word of any prosecutions. At each step of the journey, until the FBI closes the case, specialists from the Victims Assistance Program will be in touch with the victims. This is clearly an important job, but going to work every day and dealing with the victims of crime can be difficult and emotionally draining.
Yes, I've seen terrible things. Yes, I respond to mass casualty incidences and see terrible things that happen, but our desire to help others overrides any concerns we have in what we see and do.
Let's take a quick break from the murder sheet to tell you about a podcast investigating yet another unforgettable crime. The Orange Tree is a 7-part series about a 2005 homicide that happened near the University of Texas at Austin. The murder of 21-year-old Jennifer Cave, who was shot, dismembered, and left in a bathtub at her friend Colton Petoniak's apartment, continues to haunt the area to this day.
Like the Burger Chef murders, this case features plenty of twists and turns, including Colton's flight to Mexico with another UT student, Laura Hall. Both were later convicted in connection with the crime, although Colton has continued to appeal his verdict and claim innocence. The business student turned convicted murderer now says that he doesn't even remember much about the night Jennifer died.
The Orange Tree is reported on and produced by Haley Butler and Tue Thomas, who were both seniors at the University of Texas when they started this project. Together, Haley and Tue strive to piece together this tragic story in an in-depth podcast that features audio from courtroom scenes and interrogation rooms, prison phone calls, and exclusive interviews with both the perpetrators and the victim's family. You can binge all 7 episodes of The Orange Tree today on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to podcasts.
We strive to inform the public with our reporting, but running a podcast can be a stressful enterprise. There's lots of sitting hunched over a computer, getting frustrated over uncooperative editing software.
So that's why we are thrilled with our sponsor Tenassi, a company that makes a range of products from a special and potent CBD plus CBDA formula. Kevin and I have made their lotions, salves, and tinctures a key part of our daily rituals. We feel they keep us calm and reduce our aches and pains. We hadn't tried out many CBD products in the past, but we found that Tenassi's pure and potent formulas really work for us.
The most popular Tenassi products are the soft gels. Customers often take these right before bedtime to allow for better sleep and recovery. You can read feedback from other customers on Tenassi's website, talking about how these products have changed their lives.
We also love that Tenassi is supportive of scientific progress. A total of 5% of all its revenue goes back to university researchers so they can keep looking into the CBD plus CBDA formula.
Go to Tenassi.com and use code MSHEET to get 50% off at checkout. That's TANASI.com to get 50% off for your first order with promo code MSHEET. Statements regarding efficacy and safety have not been evaluated by the Food and Drug Administration. These products are not intended to diagnose, prevent, treat, or cure any disease. There is nothing like listening to a true crime podcast late at night and then rushing to make sure all your doors and windows are locked. We've definitely been there.
But these days, we feel much less worried about our safety thanks to our Simply Safe home security system.
And the nice thing about Simply Safe is that they're flexible and affordable without compromising their service. It's Simply Safe, your safety is the number one concern. But they're offering top-notch services for an affordable price. And our listeners will get a special deal on 40% off their advanced security system. Back when we lived in a tiny apartment in Brooklyn, we could have really used this Simply Safe system. It doesn't require any drilling, so it's perfect for renters.
Today, we love being able to check into our system via an app on our phones. It's great to be able to monitor our crystal clear HD live streams of our security cameras. It makes us feel like we're taking charge of our own safety.
Don't miss this chance to save big when you protect your home with the best. Get 40% off your order when you visit simplysafe.com/msheet today. Customize the perfect system for your home in just a few minutes. That's simplysafe.com/msheet. There's no safe like Simply Safe.
And now, back to the murder sheet. There is no shortage of people who need help after something as devastating as the shooting at the Borderline Bar and Grill. When a tragedy like this occurs, it is the role of the Victim Services Division to come in and lend a hand to local law enforcement agencies. It is those agencies, after all, that know the community the best.
It's always the local community that's impacted, and so we're there to support the local community. And we're there for a week or two, depending on the circumstances. It's not long term, but it's to help them through the crisis. Unfortunately, we have a lot of experience doing this, but that community, that was their first mass casualty like this, and so they did fantastic. But they were also willing to take our help and guidance, and we did it together to help navigate them through, because it's a process over many days to get to the point that they get their legs under them.
One of the first things Kevin and his team did when they started working the Borderline shooting case was set up a Victims Assistance Center.
It's a location identified. It was a couple miles from the crime scene, and it was a location that stood up in a small office space that would be advertised for victims and those impacted from this incident to come to, one-stop shop to get information, resources, meet with crisis counselors, and all in one place get an assessment of what their needs are and help them meet their needs.
One early challenge the team faced was to simply identify who the victims in this case even were.
The victims in this type of a case at a bar, at a restaurant, or if it was a shopping mall, we consider it open population, because we have no way of knowing who was there, who was supposed to be there.
That makes it very different from another common site for mass shooting events.
If there was a school shooting and we know who was supposed to be there. Teachers know how many students are in their classroom. There's not usually extra random people around. And we know that there should be 20 children accounted for, and one child called out sick that day, and so there should be 19 more. We know who's there, but with this type of victim population, we have no way of knowing who is there. There could be friends of friends who met up there. No way of knowing who's supposed to be there. So there's no list that we can go to start our process.
Even locating relatives of victims is more complex in a shooting at a location like the Borderline Bar and Grill.
The family members of the victims could also be from anywhere. Family members could be anywhere in the United States. The individuals at this location were not young children. They were young adults. Their family members could be anywhere. Unlike a school shooting where the children go to school in a particular neighborhood and their relatives, their immediate next of kin, are also somewhere in that same neighborhood because those are the parents of the children at that school. In this case, it could be family members from anywhere in the world that we need to try to find and locate. So that certainly makes it challenging.
Another complicating factor in identification is that, from the FBI's perspective, a person could be a victim of the borderline shooting even if they were not actually shot.
As I've said, we had 12 victims who were deceased, more than 20 injured. The injured can be anybody who was there and was shot or hurt. But from the FBI's perspective, if you were hurt as a result of that incident and had that incident not occurred, you would not have been hurt, then you are absolutely an injured victim.
In the case of the borderline shooting, 16 individuals sustained injuries as a result of the attack. But the FBI takes a more holistic view of harm than simply looking at physical injuries. You can also be considered a victim of a mass casualty event, even if you were not technically hurt.
And then we have these couple hundred other people who were there that were not necessarily physically injured. They were not shot. They were not hurt trying to flee the scene. They did not trip and fall and get injured or get hurt trying to exit the building, but no doubt have emotional impact from witnessing that crime, fleeing that crime, seeing other people victimized during that crime. It could be employees who have worked at that location for a long time and that was their second home, and for this to happen. And so those are what we consider present but not injured, not physically injured, but no doubt emotionally impacted significantly. And some struggled because they saw other people get killed and they lived, and it's what's called survivor's guilt, can impact them for the rest of their lives as well.
To the FBI, all of those people are considered victims, though other agencies might take a more restrictive view.
When it comes to a prosecution in these types of incidences, sometimes the prosecution, and that's determined by the U.S. Attorney's Office, not the FBI, sometimes they consider injured just those who were shot if it was a shooting incident or stabbed during a stabbing incident. But for the FBI, anybody who has physical, emotional, or even financial impact as a direct result of that crime is considered a victim in our minds.
After figuring out who the borderline victims actually were, the Victim Services Division offered a wide variety of assistance to them.
We also facilitated emergency travel support. We had people who were deceased. We had many people who were injured. And we had family members from out of town that we helped provide and facilitate emergency travel to come to the California area to meet up and provide support to their loved ones. We did that in concert with several airlines who were partners and volunteered to provide flights for that. Another role was working with the morgue where the deceased victims were taken to ensure that any jewelry, clothing, items that may have been on the deceased victim when they came into the morgue were preserved and collected, so that if it was determined that those items would not be evidence in the investigation, we could get those items cleaned and returned back to the victims and their families if they wanted those items.
Even getting property returned to the living victims was surprisingly complicated.
We also provided assistance with other personal effects. As you can imagine, hundreds of people at a bar and restaurant, everybody there, each person has phone, keys, wallets, purse, eyeglasses, jackets, clothing, and so there was lots of personal effects left behind that we had a separate team assist with, partnering with the FBI's evidence response team, which was requested to process the crime scene, the items that were not needed for evidence were brought to us, and then we went through the process of trying to figure out who do these items belong to, contacting those individuals, seeing if they want those items back or not. If so, determining if those items need to be cleaned first before giving back to them, and then facilitating the clean and in-person return of those items. Also, because this was at a bar and restaurant, everybody there had a vehicle, and we had more than 140 cars that were technically within the confines of the crime scene that little by little over the next week we worked to get back to their rightful owners. Or if it was a vehicle that belonged to a victim who was deceased, work with their next of kin to identify where they want the vehicle to go, and then we facilitated having those vehicles towed to the location of their choice.
The Victim Services Division only stays on site for a relatively short time. In the case of the Borderline shooting, they were present for around a week. Before they left, they conducted a detailed debriefing with local law enforcement agencies.
And we went victim by victim and debriefed them on everything we did, every interaction we had, everybody we met with at the hospital, every piece of clothing that we returned, person by person, so that they had a good debriefing. We gave them all of our contact information, and we ensured that they were okay with us leaving, as well as the FBI office was okay when our part was done to transition back to them.
But even after leaving, the VSD remains interested in and committed to the community and to everyone affected by the crime.
I did make contact with the local victim advocates when we approached the 1-year anniversary of that incident, and I was glad to hear that they were doing well. They continue to be thankful for our assistance, and at the 1-year anniversary, they were opening up a memorial to honor those victims, and they expected that many of the surviving victims, as well as family members of the deceased, would be in attendance, and I was happy to hear that that community was well underway a year later to healing, and that we had a part of that.
When law enforcement talks about crime, the emphasis all too often is exclusively on identifying the offenders and then punishing them. That is obviously important, but it is crucial to remember, too, that victims sometimes need more justice than can be found in a courtroom. The justice system in the United States, and as a result, true crime stories, can often feel fixated on fact-gathering and punishment. We often grapple with simple questions. How did the crime happen? Who was the killer? How will the perpetrator be punished for their actions?
The question of how survivors can start to heal after a shattering event like a mass shooting isn't a topic that much of our system seems equipped to handle. And that goes for both individuals who escaped with their lives and people who lost loved ones alike. But it's a question that Kevin Gutfleisch has focused on during his career at the FBI, one that he and his colleagues are committed to answering as best they can. And by modeling our responses off that of the FBI's Victim Services Division, perhaps other law enforcement agencies and our society as a whole can better support those left behind after a tragedy.
Special thanks to Kevin Greenlee, who composed the music for the Murder Sheet, and who you can find on the web at kevintg.com.
To keep up with the latest on the Murder Sheet, please make sure to follow us on Instagram and Twitter at Murder Sheet, and on Facebook at MSheet Podcast or by searching Murder Sheet. For exclusive content like bonus episodes and case files, become a patron of the Murder Sheet on Patreon at patreon.com/murdersheet. If you enjoyed listening to the Murder Sheet, please leave us a 5-star review to help us gain more exposure. And send tips, suggestions, and feedback to murdersheet@gmail.com. Thanks so much for listening.